Hey everybody, Jake Fletcher here, Fletcher Group, Remax Advanced Realty in Miami, Florida, here to bring you guys a new segment that I'm starting where I'm going to be bringing you guys both national and local South Florida real estate news every single week. So once a week, I'm going to be bringing you guys the most relevant stories in real estate around the country and around Miami and South Florida, and giving you my opinion on it, breaking it down, and giving you guys the facts. And this is a new segment that I just started. It's so new, I don't even have a name for it, but let's jump into it, all right? So the first story that I want to cover here is one that is super important. Let me make sure that this video is going to stay on top, float on top. Okay, so the first story is one that impacts the markets greatly, okay? So we're talking about mortgage rates. You might have heard about this, but the story keeps getting crazier, all right? So just recently, mortgage rates have hit another historic all-time low. So 30-year fixed rate mortgages are at an average of 2.86% right now, okay? 15-year fixed, 2.37, okay? So this is an incredibly important story because not only do the lower interest rates allow people to have lower monthly payments on their homes, they're actually also able to qualify for more. So if you were able to qualify for a $300,000 house before, now you may be able to qualify for $325,000 or $350,000, all right? Now, important caveat to that is that at the same time, home prices are actually also going up in most markets. So the lack of inventory is kind of propping up these home prices. And although interest rates are declining and getting lower and lower, and they're expected to get lower and lower, we're also seeing that home prices are going higher and higher, which undercuts some of that value that the low interest rates brings to buyers in the market. All right. Now, accompanying this is the fact that mortgage applications are 40% higher than a year ago. So year over year, 40% increase in mortgage applications, which means there's a lot of buying activity on the market, all right? I can tell you one thing for sure, new listings are not up 40%, okay? So that supply and demand is still very much skewed in favor of sellers, and we're gonna be talking about that in a bit, all right? Now, also interesting to note is that while new mortgage applications are up 40%, refinances are up 60% higher than a year ago. So not only are a ton of people taking advantage of these low interest rates in order to start a new mortgage application, but there's also a lot of people saying, hey, now's a great time to refinance our home for whatever reason that might be. All right, so adding on to this is the 2.86 went down from 2.93 the prior week, is the lowest level in nearly 50 years of the mortgage survey. So given that mortgage rates usually track with the 10-year treasury note, the spread between them is still above average and rates are expected to fall further. I think anyone who is really in tune with what's happening with mortgage rates also agrees. I do agree as well. I think rates could very much potentially go lower. So the ultra low mortgage rates, the real estate market is recovering faster than expected from the pandemic. Existing and new home sales have already ramped up to pre-pandemic levels. So we'll talk about this a little bit later on to see, do the stats really back it up? Are the closings really back to pre-pandemic levels? Wow, that sounds like such a big statement, right? So we're going to get into that a little bit later on, not in this video, but later on this week, and whether or not I agree with that. Short answer is not really. All right, so on to the next story. And all of that last story actually came to you from NAR.Realtor, which is the National Association of Realtors. All right, moving on to the next story. So coming to you from Forbes here is a very interesting story here. I want to give a lot of credit to Sam Chandon, who wrote this article. I think that he did a very good job of putting together a lot of information that hasn't been put together in the same place very often by people writing about this topic. So the story is America's Next Housing Crisis, how the pandemic is pushing renters to the brink. All right. So we know that there are millions of renters who are basically potentially in jeopardy of being evicted. So let's jump into the story here. So during the pandemic, the historic increase in joblessness brought on by the pandemic has pushed us to the brink of a new rental crisis, forestalled in short term by a combination of payroll protections, enhanced unemployment benefits, rent subsidies, and a national patchwork of eviction moratoria. Patchwork being the integral word there because it's different in every state. So the most far-reaching of these programs, a moratorium on evictions at properties with federally backed mortgages, and the $600 per week unemployment benefit supplements have now expired. Okay, so this is at the heart of why this is potentially a crisis, because a lot of these supplemental programs that were helping out renters and also helping out the landlords in some cases, because it's not preferable as a landlord to have to evict people. So these $600 per week unemployment benefits were helping a lot of people pay rent, which in turn helps a lot of landlords as well. So now that those have expired, there's a very dire situation that is emerging, and we're going to talk about it some more here. So communities of color are particularly at risk without these reinforcements, impacted disproportionately by the pandemic and job losses, and with more limited savings, right? So these are historically disproportionately affected demographics that are at a higher risk of not just things like not being able to pay their rent, but food insecurity, healthcare, inability to get healthcare, sort of all kinds of across the spectrum issues that make their financial situation tougher and are going to ultimately impact their ability to rent as well. Now, one thing that we know that there's been a lot of studies have come out that have shown that a lot of the jobs that have been lost are actually lower paying jobs. So a big disparity has risen in the demographics of people who are able to pay rent and not able to pay rent. And we're going to talk about it here in this article, in this story. So already by mid-July, the Census Bureau Household Pulse Survey showed just over 20% of renters had missed or deferred last month's rent. For Black households, that statistic is over 30%. So that's very troubling. Not every payment delinquency will result in an eviction, a losing strategy for both tenants and landlords, as I pointed out. And in fact, eviction may be the exceptional outcome. Lease renegotiations, slow-moving court eviction proceedings, deeper cuts in household spending on food, education, health, and relocations to lower quality housing stock further removed from economic opportunity are all set to rise in the coming months. So we're looking at kind of a perfect storm of all these factors that are going to really, really affect a lot of people, and disproportionately minorities and poorer people. So job losses and missed rent overall, measures of rental housing affordability and security improved only slightly during the pre-pandemic economic expansion. In 2018, even as the national unemployment rate was slipping to generational lows with nearly 21 million renters were classed as cost burdened, spending more than 30% of income on rent and utilities, according to the Joint Center for Housing Studies annual apartment market update. More than half of those households were severely burdened, spending in excess of 50% of their income on housing costs. Okay, so imagine that. I can't really imagine what it would be like to think spending 50% or more of my income on my housing is acceptable. But in some cases, it's necessary because rents have gone so high, but guess what hasn't gone high proportionately with those rent costs? Income. So pandemic historic job losses have hit these cost-burdened renters especially hard. For households with less than $35,000 in income, 58% reported in early July that at least one person had experienced a loss of employment income since the onset of the pandemic. The same report shows 60% of renter households experience a loss of income. So basically 60% of the country that are of renters have experienced some loss of income, right? So it's easy to understand why there are a big number of renters who are either behind on their rent or not able to pay in full, or just basically not able to pay at all. So you really start to think, okay, 60% lost income, but only 20% across the board have not paid. So there's a 1 in 3 disparity there, which tells me that a lot of renters are burning through any savings they have, selling things that they have, anything of value, borrowing money from family. They're doing anything and everything they can to get by. Now, I really, really want to highlight this fact right here. The Federal Reserve reports that 37% of households had insufficient cash on hand in 2019 to cover a $400 emergency expense. So that could be new tires on your car. That could be, something happened to you broke your toe or foot or something and had to go get a cast. I mean, any number of things could happen. You had to go to the dentist all of a sudden, or any kind of emergency expense that's $400. 37% of households had insufficient cash on hand and would not be able to cover that. So we can already see how cash strapped, that's nearly 1 in 3 Americans. It's more than 1 in 3. So that means when you walk around on a daily basis, on average, 1 out of every 3 people you see are not able to afford a $400 emergency. So that to me is like the most important fact of this whole story, because it speaks to the broader economic insufficiencies that we have to address, right? This is not just about rent. This is about the broader economic stability of our country and the economic future of not just renters, but also landlords. Because what do you think happens if a certain high percentage or a sizable percentage of renters get evicted, and now you have all these people who have evictions on their records, and it's much harder for them to get rental property with an eviction on their record. A lot of landlords just plain old won't rent to anyone with an eviction on their record. So, this is something that I think is there's a lot of opportunity for disaster, and it's going to really rely on the government to step in, as much as some people might not like that. But we really need to have some kind of national plan to address this, in my opinion. Otherwise, things are going to be not looking very good here in another year or so. So really, actually, before that, potentially too. So as we go on, we have some graphs here that I think are pretty interesting. So spending, the EIP, that's your economic impact payment, which is part of the CARES Act. So absent substantial savings, nearly 2/3 of renter households with incomes below $25,000 have used at least part of their EIP to make rent. Okay, so that's what we see here. 66% of $25,000 or less income by household have used that on rent. Now, $25,000 to $35,000, that's almost half. $35,000 to $50,000, that's still 38%. $50,000 to $75,000, you're still almost at a quarter of those people. And then $75,000 to $100,000, you're still at 13%. All right. Now, mind-bogglingly, $100,000 or over, you're at 6%. I don't know how. What are you renting? Like I think you got to be a little over leveraged if you're part of that $100,000 income or plus, and you're needing being the operative word there, to use this money to help pay your rent. Maybe this is just that it's like a bonus for them. Spending of EIP checks on rent by race. So 21% for Asians, 57% for Black Americans. That is absolutely astounding and jaw-dropping. 36% for both Hispanic and other, and 20% for white. Now, the thing I don't like about this graph is that you're talking percentages of each of these demographics. You're not getting an actual integer, a number of Americans, right? So you would have to go and say, okay, out of X number of Black Americans, how many of them are renters? And then 57% of those renters, well, actually not even, it'd be out of all those renters, how many of them got EIP checks, which I don't think that's necessarily even available information. And then out of the ones that got the EIP, you would know it's 57% are spending, at least a portion of that on their rent. So not necessarily good news, right? Now, the expiring provisions of the CARES Act have been a substantial stabilizer. Lori Goodman and her colleagues at the Urban Institute estimate the unemployment supplement restored 78% of the income support needed to return households to pre-pandemic rent-to-income ratios, right? So now that that's gone, that 78% are going from restored to unrestored, essentially. It's just a matter of timing, right? Earlier this month, only 26% of households earning less than $25,000 had a high degree of confidence that they will cover rent in August. Approximately 21% have no confidence or have already deferred rent payments. So we see 26%, $25,000 or less, have high confidence, right? So we can see the high confidence in being able to pay your rent, of course, goes up as income does. Then we see moderate confidence. It's a little more stable across the board of who has moderate confidence. And this is kind of a subjective measure anyways. Slight confidence that they'll be able to pay next month's rent. You see about a quarter there up to $35,000, and then going down as you go up in income, $35,000 and over. And then no confidence at all you see is literally opposite of where the high confidence metrics are. You see the people who have no confidence the most are people who earn less income. So there's really no surprise there. Confidence to pay next month's rent by race, we see again here. And again, this doesn't give you numbers of people. It's just giving you percentages of each of these demographics. So we see that no confidence in being able to pay next month's rent is greatest reflected actually in Hispanic Americans at 21%, 14% for Black Americans. And then you see it's pretty kind of 11, 12, actually pretty low for white people, 9%, and 14% for all across the board. And then we see slight confidence. We see that raising there for Hispanic, Black, and other. And then Asian and white are 13 and 12, average of 20%. Moderate confidence, we see, again, the highest is for Hispanic Americans. And then we see as we go up to the high confidence, we see Asian and white Americans and other are excelling far past Black Americans and Hispanic Americans in terms of their confidence and their ability to be paying next month's rent. So we see, again, not my favorite metrics in terms of we don't get a sense of how many Americans that is by the graph, but it does, the cross-referencing of these graphs does show us that there is absolutely an issue here that needs to be addressed, and that there are issues that run along racial lines as well that need to be addressed in addition to income, right? So moving on here. So there's also another factor that affects this, which is whether or not you have children. So believe it or not, confidence to pay next month's rent is highly impacted by if you have children. 20% of people with children felt they had no confidence they'd be able to pay versus 9% that don't have children. Slight confidence was 25% to 16, moderate 28 to 27, high confidence, this one's crazy, 27% high confidence for people with children, up to 48%. So almost half of people who don't have children have high confidence they'll be able to pay their rent, okay? So to protect renters during the crisis, a patchwork of eviction moratoria were introduced in its initial weeks, both at the federal and local level. This covered more than 12 million units with federally backed mortgages, which has now expired, but will be another month before eviction papers make their way to court, right? And as we said earlier, there's going to be a lot of slow court proceedings. There's going to be a lot of evictions backlogged. So I think that it's going to take a long time for municipalities to work their way through these these issues. So in some states and cities, the freeze on evictions has been extended outright as the severity of the labor market downturn has become clearer. And another aspect of that is in the new executive order, which we're going to talk about in a second, that they have deemed that if you're at risk of contracting or spreading coronavirus by being evicted, that you're also your moratorium for being evicted is extended through a new executive order. So there's been a lot of misinformation in terms of what is required of renters, what's required of landlords. But in general, there is in some markets, there are landlords who are the majority they're the ones providing the majority of low-income housing, especially in rural areas. So, this affects everybody, not this eviction moratorium being, it's supposedly extended by this executive order. We're going to get into that in a second, but these provisions that protect renters expiring is going to have a big impact, not just on those renters, also on the landlords as well. Now, your average real estate investor is like a mom and pop type situation where they still have to pay their mortgages unless they go into forbearance. This is, it's a tough situation for everybody, right? Because on one hand, the renters, you don't want to put renters out on the street. On the other hand, these mom and pop investors, they're not like Invitation Homes or something that is doing everything they can to make an extra penny. They're more often than not regular people that are just trying to pay the mortgage, and trying to build some assets and some equity for their family. And now if they have renters that aren't able to pay rent, well, it makes it a lot tougher for them to be able to make ends meet as well. Now you could say inherently they're in a better place, which, there's definitely an argument to be made about that. But at the same time, just because they're technically in a financially better place doesn't necessarily mean that it's less stressful for them. It's not more stressful or less stressful. It's probably just as stressful. Maybe for some individuals, it's less stressful if they have more assets. But for your average small-time investor, this is very stressful stuff if your tenants aren't able to pay rent and your income doesn't cover the mortgage, right? So there's a whole nother lesson in there about not over leveraging yourself, but who could predict that a pandemic was going to hit when it did, right? So there's two narratives here. The chorus of warnings of a rent crisis have been dominated by policy analysts and more recently by the press. Their message stands in contrast with data from institutional apartment investors and lenders who are generally more sanguine in their outlook for the sector, which means they're more positive, basically. The differing assessments suggest widening disparities between the institutional market and the rental market for income-constrained families. So I completely disagree with the institutional investors. They have a incentive to be positive in the face of disparity, whereas the analysts are just doing their job and analyzing the data. And I'm on the ground here in the real estate industry, and I feel that what analysts are saying about what's potentially could happen is much closer to reality than the investors saying, no, things are great. What are you talking about? People with money are making more money right now than they were before, and they're able to make more investments. So things are great, but there's got to be a tipping point. At what point is there too much supply of apartments from institutional investors where there aren't enough renters without evictions on their records or with good enough income to qualify to rent your properties, right? So I'm not saying that we're on one side or the other of the spectrum right now, but it is a spectrum, and we have to realize and recognize that there's some give and take there. Yeah, it's great that the investing side is positive about buying more investments, right? But who's going to buy their product, right? So it's troubling nonetheless. So that's pretty much it for this story that I wanted to cover. And then to add on to this, we talked about President Trump's executive order. This is coming from FloridaRealtors.org. Halts evictions until 2021. So the order elicited protests from NAR, as it's unclear if property owners will bear the cost of the ban. Trump ordered the CDC to oversee it to slow the spread of COVID-19. So this is what I'm talking about, all right? This is not a political statement from me one way or the other, but this executive order was garbage, absolute garbage, because, and it's backed up by National Association of Realtors and the National Association of Home Builders, both agree with me, along with pretty much anyone who knows anything about real estate. And it's kind of surprising that our real estate-oriented president sent an executive order down the pipeline like this that is not very thorough, and it leaves too much undecided. So basically, they've halted most evictions for the rest of 2020. And the president said, "I want to make it unmistakably clear that I'm protecting people from evictions." Well, is that true? The order gives the CDC oversight of the eviction moratorium in effect to slow the spread of COVID-19. The ban goes into effect on September 4th, and the CDC plans to post the eviction moratorium rules then. In the meantime, a version of those rules, not yet official, is posted online. So this has already happened, right? So these rules have already come out. NAR issued a statement along with CCIM and the Institute of Real Estate Management saying the order virtually halts all U.S. evictions through the end of the year. And while NAR appreciates and is supportive of administration efforts to ensure struggling Americans can remain in their homes, this order as written will bring chaos to our nation's critical rental housing sector and put countless property owners out of business, says NAR President Vince Malta. Any eviction moratorium must also come with rental assistance for property owners, the vast majority of which are mom and pop investors who are still required to meet their financial obligations even as they cease to receive income on their properties. So we just talked about this, right? These mom and pop investors, it's not like they're Scrooge McDuck backstroking through piles of gold, right? Most of them maybe have one or two properties, and if it's a single family home and the person living there can't pay the rent and you're paying your mortgage and this other mortgage, now and maybe you've lost some income because of the pandemic. So now your debt to income ratio is like through the roof. You're not able to pay the mortgage. So you either go into forbearance, which is there's a lot of red tape involved. There's a lot of regulations about how you got to keep track of things and prove certain things over a course of a period of years and years. So you're adding more red tape onto the backs of these small-time investors, and you're not addressing the root of the problem, which is, where is the money? Jerry Maguire said it best, show me the money, right? Or his client in the movie, whatever, said, show me the money, right? So the problem isn't, the root of the problem isn't that people are at risk of being evicted. The root of the problem is that people can't pay rent, right? So whether it's the renters paying the rent or it's the landlords being able to cover the cost of the missed rent, something's gotta give, man. So this is where leadership is supposed to come into play, and we're supposed to have clear and beneficial attack plan on a national level to address these issues, okay? So the National Association of Home Builders issued a similar statement to NAR saying this could result in unforeseen negative economic consequences without dedicated funding for rental assistance. So what are some of those unforeseen negative economic consequences? Well, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of this story. If there's all these renters with evictions on their records, and most landlords don't like to rent to people with evictions on their records, well, you're going to have a huge portion of the population that aren't able to rent something out. What are they going to do, right? Is there enough affordable housing or government housing for all those people? No, there's not. And then furthermore, other negative economic consequences. Well, let's say you're a property owner, right? Now you've gone from having 10 qualified candidates for your rental property to now, let's say you have 6 qualified candidates for your rental property, right? But let's say that there's 10 apartments for rent in your area. And those 6 different qualified candidates rented elsewhere, leaving your unit vacant. What do you have to do in order to rent your unit? You're going to have to lower the monthly rental price. And this is a scenario that's going to be replicated across the country. That's a fact. Rent prices are already trending downwards here in Miami, of all places, where 64% of our population rents. So if rental prices are already starting to go down, that's an indication of the broader real estate economic outlook, because rental prices have a ripple effect throughout the real estate market. As rent prices go down, so too do these investors' sale prices for their properties when they go to sell. Because if your pro formas are going down, you can't justify a higher sale price. You have to lower the price in order to sell the property. So sale prices are going to go down, which then could have a negative price impact on other types of real estate, as well as investors look to make more sound financial purchases, and the competition between properties increases in certain areas. Now, of course, inventory plays a huge role in this. If we continue to see less and less inventory, that could be not as much of a factor where we see prices trending downwards because of this, but it's definitely going to have some impact. It's just a question of how much and when are we going to see that impact. All right, so I think that they handled this all wrong, and landlords are still permitted to pursue evictions against tenants committing criminal acts threatening the health and safety of other residents and damaging property, among other offenses, is important to say. So, if your landlord can make the argument that you're committing criminal acts and so on and so forth, if you are, then you're still at risk, of being evicted. So, I just think that they really went about this all wrong. These mom and pop investors, they still are having to pay their mortgages. They're still having to pay property tax, maintenance, updating the mechanical and infrastructure of these buildings. There's a lot of costs. There's a lot of overhead costs to being an investor, and they are incurring those costs. So I think that it would have just been much smarter, instead of saying, hey, but we're going to pause the evictions until next year, until the beginning of 2021. But not really, because it's really the effort is to slow the spread of COVID-19. So if you're not at risk of being contracting or spreading COVID-19 or of being homeless, then technically in some states you still can be evicted. So it's not really a ban on evictions. It's like a pseudo kind of ban, up to discretion of local people, local leaders, and people who are making those decisions. And then at the same time, not addressing the root of the problem, which is that people are economically struggling right now. And all this does is it doesn't even put a Band-Aid on a wound. It's putting half of a Band-Aid that you found in the gutter on a wound. Because at the end of the day, that Band-Aid might have bacteria in it, and you're going to get an infection. It's going to be worse than it was before, right? So it's just a lot of attempts to handle this that the results kind of conflict with each other, and I just think it's not a good strategy. Now, continuing this story here, so this is coming from FloridaRealtors.org again. So Apartment List found that 10% of renters failed to make their full August payment by the end of the month, and 1 in 6 started September owing $1,000 or more in missed rent. Okay, so this is kind of backing up what we've already talked about, except they're saying that it's actually a little smaller number, 10% rather than 20%, that failed to make their full August payment. So of course, the methodology of these studies is always a factor, but interesting thing from this article talking about this rental situation is a quote from Chris Salviati, who says, these figures reflect a slight and surprising improvement from August. Apartment List housing economist. He says part of the reason could be the loss of previous renters who moved out and currently live with family or friends. So this is a problematic statement, okay? Let me explain why. So Chris Salviati, apartmentless housing economist, I don't know who he is. I have nothing against the guy, but this is problematic because he's basically saying, oh, the numbers are potentially better, not because economic factors have improved, but because a certain number of people who were bringing that number down, they've been taken care of. Essentially, something has happened. They're either living with family or friends. Well, what's problematic about that is that it's not exactly true. We know from video evidence that we've seen of people being evicted that there are a lot of people who have nowhere to go. There's a lot of people with no family or friends that they can go live with, especially if they were living with their family, multi-generational households, and they're on the street. And we don't really have any metrics to really know exactly what percentage of these renters are going to end up homeless, but it's more than zero for sure. It's a non-zero number, and that's something that's just not being addressed at all, really, is the fact that there's going to be a lot more homeless people now and in the near future. So in the first weeks of September, 32% of renters had not fully paid their rent bill. In addition, 10% of renters had not fully paid their bill from August. So the 32% thing is kind of skewed because a lot of times what I've seen is they take these numbers like right away after the first. And, some people's rent isn't due until the 4th or the 5th or the 15th, or random days. Not everybody's rent is due on the 1st. So, anytime I see, by the first week of this month, take it for a grain of sand, right? But based on the consistency of the trend in prior months, we expect that 9 in 10 renters will pay their September rent in full by the end of the month. So they expect it to kind of continue along the lines of what happened in August. So rent debt is more common among Black and Hispanic renters. 41% of Black renters and 48% of Hispanic renters still owe rent from the spring and summer months. So that's really backed up by the graphs that we saw in the story from Forbes, where we saw a big disparity between Hispanic and Black renters in terms of their confidence in being able to pay next month's rent, right? So that's backing that up. Renters are making significant financial sacrifices to stay afloat. Among renters that have fallen behind on payments, 30% report running up credit card debt, 31% sold off assets, 16% dipped into retirement savings. Give you a guess why it's only 16% dipped into retirement savings, because most of them probably didn't have any retirement savings at all. Otherwise, that would have been a higher number, right? So, and not to mention that Americans already have 1 trillion worth of credit card debt. I mean, it's ridiculous. So as if we needed to be running up more credit card debt. So yeah, it's not a good situation. And I think that, we're in for troubling times in the times ahead, and unless something drastic happens. And, I don't have the answers, but this ain't it. Evicting a bunch of people, not helping out landlords, just in general, basically kind of doing the bare minimum, I feel like is not working. So on to the next story. So the next story is coming from the National Association of Realtors. This is a story that is reflecting something I've been talking about for a while. The title is "Sellers Are Calling the Shots, but for How Much Longer?" All right. So the general premise is that because inventory has been so low that, and this is across the country, this is a pretty much consistent trend throughout the country, because inventory is so low and prices have been going up and up and up, there's still strong buyer demand, as we said earlier, with 40% increase year over year of new mortgage applications, that sellers are basically in control of these transactions, right? And this is something that has been, I've seen it time after time after time working with buyers. These houses, single family homes especially, are getting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 or more offers within the first week of being on the market, because there's just so little inventory of single family homes. and there are so many buyers looking for single family homes. You have a bit of a push out of condo life into single family homes because of the pandemic. People want more space, etc. And also in general, it's always been a bit more of a popular style of housing. And in addition, here in South Florida especially, you have a lot less single family homes on the market than you do condos, especially right now. So what we're seeing in this report here is they're basically saying that prices accelerate to new highs and homes sell faster. Quote, sellers are calling the shots in today's market, says Danielle Hale, Realtor.com's chief economist. Quote, prices are rising and housing inventory is vanishing almost as fast as it appears. So I don't know if she's intentionally not correlating the two, but I mean, it's beyond a correlation. It's literally a causation, in my opinion, that the lack of inventory is causing the prices to go up. I mean, it's Economics 101. What did you learn on the first day of Economics 101? High demand and low supply equals high prices, right? The less there is of something and the more people want it, the higher the price is going to go. Right. So, it seems that she's connecting the two in terms of they're in the same sentence, but it's not in terms of, prices are rising because housing inventory is vanishing. It's more like they're both happening at the same time. Well, they're definitely connected. I can tell you for sure. And again, I don't know if she's meaning to not intentionally correlate those, but she goes on to say, that there's two housing indicators that may hint at a turn in the market. Housing demand from buyers has cooled slightly, while new listings showed a smaller decline than previous weeks. This could be a hiccup in weekly activity, or if these trends continue, they could signal a shift in market dynamics leading into the fall when political, economic, and health-related uncertainties abound. Gonna have to disagree with you here, all right? So, has buyer demand cooled slightly? Absolutely not. New mortgage applications are up 40% year over year. So maybe last week they were up 42% year over year, but just because they've gone down 2% from all time, maybe I don't know if they're necessarily all time highs, but just because they've gone down 2%, but they're still up 40% doesn't mean that they're cooling. It just means that they're not liquid magma hot anymore. They're like they've rolled down the hill of the volcano a bit, but they're still lava. It's still lava hot. Okay, so I completely couldn't disagree with that more. There are so many buyers in the market right now, it's insane. There's way more buyers than there is inventory. Now, the second thing is that new listings showed a smaller decline than previous weeks. So what that means is the amount of new listings has gone down since COVID started, and then in the previous week, they went down less than they did before. So there was not as much of a decline. That's got to be, the funniest thing to me is when people take data that happened once and try to act like it's statistically significant and that it signals some major shift in the market and da-da-da. No, it's 1 week that there was slightly less of a decline. People, you're not going to see a big ramping up of people wanting to put their houses on the market until a variety of factors happen. For some people, they're waiting for a vaccine. For some people, they're waiting for maybe the first of the year. For some people, they're waiting for the right time for them to move personally. For other people, they're waiting for the kids to be able to go back to college and not be doing online school at home. There's a million different reasons why people aren't listing their homes right now. Of course, it's a great time to list your home if you are thinking of listing your home, all-time highs, etc. But these are not things that are like all of a sudden everything has changed. No, everything that was a factor into causing people to not want to list their homes are still factors. They're still happening. And I think to take one little data point of, we had a little bit less of a decline, and that's not how it works. Like this, you got to look at the bigger picture, Danielle. So I disagree with that. Now, the rest of this article is basically, not as significant in my opinion, except for here. Meanwhile, home prices continue to escalate. Median listing prices are up 10.8 2.8% annually, which is the fastest pace of growth in more than 2 years. Time on the market is now 12 fewer days than a year ago, so houses are selling quicker. So prices are up 10.8% annually, but you're not correlating that to the fact that you just said inventory is vanishing almost as fast as it appears. So, again, I don't know if she's purposely not connecting the two. Maybe, she's an economist. She's not a realtor. She's not on the ground. So I get it. But, prices are going up because there's more bidding wars happen. Some buyers need to buy. Interest rates are so low that even if you're paying a little bit more for your property, at the end of the day, you're probably still paying less over the course of that 30-year term of your mortgage than you were going to 3-4 years ago, because rates are so much lower. You're paying a lot less interest over the life of the loan, and you can afford to pay a little bit more now because of that, right? Because your monthly payments are a bit lower. So, I think that there's a lot that was kind of like left out, not said there. So, moving on. So, the next story is coming from the Miami Herald. The title is "Forget Miami? Another South Florida community sees home sales double." So this is interesting here. So Broward had the most new signed contracts in August compared to its neighboring South Florida counties. It's no surprise, one realtor said, with more buyers both from out of state and Miami searching for a sweet middle ground when it comes to density. Quote, "Most of our buyers are not looking to go to a rural area. They feel that Broward is a compromise of having some of the advantages of a big city," said Dan Teixeira, I think I said that right. We'll go with it. A realtor from Douglas Elliman. So we'll just read the last little part. New signed contracts more than doubled year over year in Broward by 135.6% increase for single-family homes and 161.1% growth for condos, according to Douglas Elliman and Miller Samuel August 2020 report. Miami-Dade experienced a year-over-year increase of 18.5% for single-family homes and 2.2% for condos. All right, so I agree with this. I agree because I've been selling a lot of homes in Broward lately. And the reason why, anecdotally, is because people want to buy single family homes, but the prices in Miami-Dade are a lot higher compared to Broward. So you get a lot more for your money up there. It's very simple, buyer behavior there that is pretty, honestly, predictable. My kitty wants to say hello here. So, this is the least surprising thing in the world to me, but it's interesting that it's a whole story. That's Jasper. Hey, Jaspy cat. Hey, buddy. So, again, least surprising thing in the world to me, but it was kind of surprising to see actually that there was a bigger growth in condos than there was for single family homes. I attribute that to the fact that there's a lot more inventory in condos. So we'll see how it plays out, The report compared a number of newly signed contracts for homes priced between $200,000 to above $1 million on the MLS. The market is, quote, "The market is robust in Broward," Teixeira said. "We handled long before COVID the quality of life issues. The buyers that are coming up here from Miami and predominantly from New York have sensed that Broward offers them a lot of options from boating to the beach promenade." So you get a lot of the same benefits. It's just the next county up, but a lot less in terms of the cost of real estate. And, it shows for sure. I mean, you can get for a single family home for $300,000 up there, you can get what you would have to pay $450 or so here in Miami in some communities. So it's a big difference. So on to the next story. So also coming from the Miami Herald, new affordable and public housing is coming soon to Brownsville. So the historic Brownsville neighborhood is getting an injection of brand new affordable and public housing. Lincoln Gardens, a 3-phase residential project that will cover an entire city block between Northwest 46th and 48th Street and Northwest 24th and 25th Avenue, will add a total of 211 rental apartments and 10 townhomes, all earmarked for public, affordable, and senior housing. The 9-acre project will be comprised of 4 3-story apartment buildings and 10 townhome units. The apartments will range in size from 2 to 4 bedrooms. The project also included $2 million in improvements to the adjacent Marva Bannerman Park. So 49 of the 134 apartments built during the first phase will be earmarked for public housing households earning 60% or less of the area median income. Let me let my cat out real quick. Okay, another 33 units will be earmarked as affordable households earning 60% or less of the AMI, average median income, area median income. And 52 units will go to households earning 80% of the AMI. So, I think that I would have liked to see more households going towards the lower income people. 49 of 134 for people who make 60% or less of the median income, 33 for people making 60%. For affordable, earmarked as affordable, right? So you have 49 that are going to be public housing, and then 33 marked as affordable. Affordable is subjective, so I would have liked to see, maybe half of them go for public housing, especially in that area where it's traditionally a lower income area. You have a lot of concern about gentrification and people being pushed out of their areas, and that's historically is a historically black community. So all the stuff we talked about in earlier stories about Hispanic and black communities being disproportionately affected by the disparities and difficulty to pay rent, and their confidence in being able to make their next rent payment are further expounded by the fact that you're having these type of projects come in, and they're maybe not catering to the current community as well as they could. They're kind of more pushing in the direction of households that are making a little bit more money than a lot of the households in that area. So you could say, oh, well, they're all earmarked for people making less than 100% of the area median income. But what's the area, right? Because I know for sure that, there's not a ton of households in Brownsville making more than $73,000 a year. I'm sure there are, but, they're the outliers, right? So why are, more than a third of the units going towards that? So anyways, I think we can do a better job. I think that it's commendable that they're trying, but try harder, people. All right. So on to our last couple stories here. Last one about Miami here, coming again from the Miami Herald. This developer is ditching Central Miami for the Grove, at least for its offices. So one CocoWalk or CocoWalk, whatever it's going to end up being called, is now 85% leased. So this company, American Land Ventures, based in Miami, is leaving the Brickell area after 15 years to go to Coconut Grove to be closer to where their employees reside. They're renting out a over 4,000 square foot office, and now that 85,000 and change square foot 5-story building is 85% leased. So this is further evidence to another thing I've been saying for a while, which is that Coconut Grove is going through a revival period in real estate. It's already basically at its peak, in my opinion, but I think the peak's going to extend for a while because you have this CocoWalk is going in, Grand Plaza is going in. There's a lot of developments happening in Coconut Grove that I think is going to, at the very least, sustain the high prices and will likely, in my opinion, continue to add to the increase in average sale price in Coconut Grove, which is my favorite neighborhood in Miami, one of my favorite neighborhoods, if not my favorite. So I think that it's a shame that it's overpriced, honestly. But it is what it is. If there's somebody willing to pay, there's somebody willing to provide. So that's capitalism, right? And hey, more power to them. If they can get the price that they're asking for, go for it. Last story here. So this story is coming from FloridaRealtors.org. This is a crazy story, and it's also very scary. Utah agent finds an armed man hiding during a showing. So another event serves as a Realtor Safety Month reminder. I didn't know it was Realtor Safety Month. In showing a vacant home, agent unlocked a basement door and encountered a rifle pointed at his chest. The male subject was pointing the rifle at her and one of her clients. The man allegedly told the agent and the potential buyer, get off of the property, of which I'm sure that they complied, because who wouldn't at that point in time. Police said they were initially unable to get the man to come to the door. Eventually, though, he opened the door for police without the rifle by his side. And Matthew Lee Hershey, 26, in connection, they arrested him in connection with the incident, charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault, and they didn't say whether he was the owner of the house or not. The agent thought the home was supposed to be vacant. That's an interesting situation. I would have definitely called the listing agent right away and given them an earful. But this follows actually another story a couple weeks ago. 2 men in Ohio were arrested and charged in connection with the attempted abduction of a female real estate agent at a home she was showing. So just be careful out there, whether you're a realtor or you're going to look at properties. Always have your wits about you. This is why whenever I go to visit a property, whether it's occupied or not, whenever I knock on the door, I show up, I knock on the door first, then I go to access the key, and once I open the door, before I even open it, once I crack it at first, and I scream out loud, realtor, so anybody inside knows, hey, I'm not an intruder or anything like that, I'm a realtor, here to do my job, please don't shoot me or point a rifle at my chest. So crazy story. Be safe out there. Have your wits about you. Carry some sort of protection, whether it be mace or anything that is legally advantageous for you to carry. So that's it for my first real estate news segment. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about anything, or if you want to make any comments about anything that I said. Please feel free. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel while you're here. It's a little button down there. And then also make sure that you ring the bell so that you get notified when I make new videos. Check out my other playlists and all of that, and follow me on Instagram at jake.miami. So that wraps it up, and I'll catch you guys next time. Jake Fletcher, Fletcher Group, Remax Advanced Realty here in Miami, Florida. Sell smart, buy bold. Catch you on the next one. Peace.